Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another week of Behind the Mic here on ASTV. This week we have a fun show lined up for you with a pair of guests this week. We'll be joined by Saskatoon Blades radio play-by-play voice Les Lazaruk and McGill University defenseman and former WHL All-Star Scott Walford. Les will run us through a preview of the Blades heading into next month's start of the WHL's East Division hub season, and then we'll engage with Scott on a discussion about the working relationship between a player and a broadcaster. So before we take our first break, we'll remind you to follow ASTV at astvproductions.com, and you can follow us across the social media platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and you can find our live shows on Facebook and YouTube, and YouTube is where you can find the archives of our show and all of our shows here at ASTV Productions. So we'll step aside, we'll have a quick break, and we'll be back on the other side with Les Lazaruk and Scott Walford. I'm Jonathan Hodgson. Thanks for watching Behind the Mic. And welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV. Jonathan Hodgson back with you for another week, joined now by our pair of guests this week. First time we've done this. Les Lazaruk and Scott Walford. Guys, how are you?
Scott, you go ahead first.
Thanks, Les. Yeah, I'm doing really good, thanks. Just here at home in Vancouver, kind of living that COVID lifestyle, training, doing school, and not too much. How about you, Les?
Probably about the same as you, only it's a lot colder here in Saskatoon than it would be in Port Coquitlam, BC. We've just come through a real cold spell, temperatures in the minus 30s and wind chills in the minus 40s and even into the minus 50s on some overnights. So it's finally starting to warm up a little bit, and we're starting to unthaw here in Saskatoon.
You know, that's why I moved out to Victoria. I couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah, well, I can understand that.
I would say we've got you beat, but we had 40 centimeters of snow here the last couple of days, so we're not immune to it either.
No, the true. Although we did have that back at the beginning of November, so we can get it all when it comes to inclement weather here in Saskatoon, without a doubt. As Scott has found out, even in one season with the Blades, he found out what it's like out this way.
Yeah, don't miss plugging in my car.
Yeah, what was one of the first things that your billet family told you to do when you got there?
It was to get there was a lot of things, but it was to get a block heater, and I left it until minus 30. Barely started, but it finally did. I had some good friends at Phobia Auto that helped me out.
Very good.
Oh, that's good stuff. Well, guys, thanks for coming on for a chat. I know we've been looking forward to this for some time, and we got a couple of things to get into. So I guess we'll dive into it. The topic of the day around the WHL is the hub season coming up, and it's going to look different in each of the divisions. Les, what can you tell us about the plans for the Saskatchewan teams?
Well, for the 5 Saskatchewan teams plus the 2 in Manitoba, the Winnipeg Ice and the Brandon Wheat Kings, they're all going to congregate in Regina in a hub situation. Actually, they'll start this coming Saturday, February the 20th, with self-quarantining. So they're responsible for themselves to be self-quarantining. They will then enter the hub in Regina and get tested, and they have to test negative in order to actually be allowed into the hub at the University of Regina dorms starting on the 27th. They will then stay in some quarantining again, come out and start practicing on March the 5th, and then the games will start. Each team's 24-game season will start on March the 12th, although there is no actual schedule released as of yet, but they're supposed to start on March the 12th. So everybody's waiting with bated breath for that. But in the meantime, the players themselves are finally got a date that they can start focusing on and getting ready for. And I know that a lot of people are very, very excited about that. Even an old broadcaster like me is thrilled to pieces with the prospect of being able to get down to Regina and start calling some hockey games again.
And I know there's a difference of opinions on having a 24-game season. Basically, from what I understand, it is a slate of games to get your draft eligibles a little bit of work, to give your 20s one more chance to go out the right way. There's a couple of pessimistic views that I've seen that have said, well, why do you come back for 24 games? What do you, and both of you can get in on this, what do you think the value is for the players to have this quick schedule that is going to look quite different from a typical year?
Well, I just think that it's important for them to be able to do this for their own mental health as much as anything else. And then from the physical point of view, the ability, as you said, Jonathan, to be able to play. And it's not just the 20-year-olds and the draft eligible kids, it's everybody. There's scouts going to be at every game. There's going to be university promoters that are going to be watching, university recruiters that are going to be watching. So, like how it happened with Scott, McGill University had their eyes on him and recruited him, and now he's going to be playing for them when that finally gets to happen again. And there's going to be guys in this league that are going to be watched very closely by universities across Canada that maybe don't have professional hockey in their sights right away. And of course, for the ones who are going to be finishing off their 20-year-olds careers, that's great. A guy like Chase Waters is going to finally get an opportunity to finish his career and have it done by actually playing games. And again, that's the unfortunate part for Scott, is that your 20-year-old season didn't end the way you'd like it to. You didn't get to finish it off as you would like to have seen other guys do it. And as far as the draft eligible kids, even the 15 and 16-year-olds, you're going to see some underage kids get a chance to play and be exposed to it. And I think it gives an opportunity for players to figure out what the culture is, the newcomers of what a team's culture is. So I think it's important, and especially after you've been away from it for 11 months. It's like 3 off seasons. That's long enough already. The fact that they're able to do this, the fact that the league and the teams are putting their money where their mouth is and are going to foot the bill for this without getting any kind of revenue back, I think is important for the Western Hockey League players, especially, to be able to do this.
And Scott, I'll ask you something. Les brought up Chase Waters, and he is now going to get a chance to become the first 3-year captain in the history of the Saskatoon Blades, which is a pretty impressive feat with the Blades history dating back to 1967. Scott, in your one season with the Blades last year, after being traded over from Victoria, what was your experience under the leadership of Chase Waters?
Yeah, Chase, I can't say enough good things about Chase. He really, he's a great leader. He's a great friend of mine. We actually talk pretty much every week, whether it's fantasy football or just about, he's taking a course that I took through Athabasca, whether it's just about life, future, the season. So, I mean, Chase is one of those people that you meet in hockey, and he's going to be a friend for life, not just for me, but for a lot of guys. And his leadership style is something that's, it's a trait of his that is in him, and I don't even think he so much as even tries to lead, but he just does. He's just a natural leader. He leads by example. He knows when to speak up. He knows when to be quiet. He's the hardest working guy. He's at the rink first. He's one of the last guys to leave, and I know personally, like, he is around 24/7 for you, whether it's something at the rink you want to talk about or not. He's there, no judgment. He's just a great overall guy. And honestly, probably, I'm kind of blanking on the captains, and I don't know all the captains in the Western League, but he's arguably probably the best captain in the league.
And speaking of guys from last year, and a pair of players who will not be there as part of one of the recent releases from the WHL concerning the hubs. In one of the announcements, it was stated that there would be no Euros this season due to the travel complications and just leveling the playing field. So in terms of the Blades, that means no Radek Kucherik and no Martin Fasco-Rudis. Either one of you can jump in on this one about what they brought last year and what kind of a hole that's going to leave this year.
Well, Scott would be better qualified to be able to tell what those guys brought as far as a former teammate of theirs. So you go ahead, Scott. You start off, and I'll finish up if I have anything to add.
Yeah, I think with Fasco Rudis, or not Fasco Rudis, just Fasco, he came in and he added a spark into our lineup. I don't think that he probably got the opportunity in Everett that he did with us, but he added a spark not only on the ice but in the room. I think he became best friends with everyone with his energetic kind of personality, and he had a lot of life, and not only with his play but especially in the room. Guys like Crank and Robbins really gravitated towards him, and you could see their chemistry on the ice, and they hung out off the ice all the time. So unfortunately he won't be there, but that'll be a good step for Krinkovic and Robbins to really take another step and kind of build on their chemistry. And it's too bad for Radek that he can't go back, because I mean he took huge steps last year. I mean you saw from last year's World Juniors to this year's how much better he was, and he was stellar at the World Juniors this year. He was arguably their top defenseman, and I think he might have even gotten that award for his team. So obviously they're gonna miss that on the point for the Blades, but he's got another year. He can be back next year, so I'm sure he's a hard worker. He'll keep developing, and next year he'll show that he's taken even more strides in his game.
Yeah, when it comes to Martin Fasco-Rudis not being able to come back and play with Tristan Robbins and Kyle Krinkovic in the second half of last season, those two, that threesome after the trade deadline were just awesome. They really were the driving force of the offense for the team in the second half of the season. And unfortunate that Martin Fasco-Rudis won't be back. Radek Kucherik, as Scott mentioned, really improved leaps and bounds from the beginning of his first year in the Western Hockey League back in September, October of 2019 until right through the World Juniors that we saw in the Edmonton bubble. As far as replacing them, that's going to be difficult. The Blades went out right away after they found out and realized that they weren't going to be able to have imports, and acquired a kid that, geez, I liken him to listening to Scott Walford talk. Very cerebral, very good defenseman who's going to be a 20-year-old for the team this year in Wyatt McLeod they got from the Edmonton Oil Kings. And I'm curious to watch what Wyatt McLeod brings to the team. I remember him playing for the Oil Kings, and I think he'll definitely bring that leadership aspect to it. He'll have some solid defensive ability, a guy that can do it at both ends of the ice. So he's a pretty complete defenseman, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we get with Wyatt McLeod in the Saskatoon Blades jersey. Unfortunately, not having Martin Fasco-Rudis or Radek Kucherik back this year.
And another recent move they just made was picking up Blake Stevenson from Tri-City, I believe. Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about that move?
Well, outside of the fact that they're getting a more experienced guy, and I think a lot of it is an eye towards next season as well, where he could be back as a 20-year-old. So that's those kind of moves that Colin Priestner likes to make, is to look ahead, not just for right now, but it's to look ahead for the future as well. And I'm curious to see how he fits in and how he is able to perform offensively. He's never been a big offensive guy with the Tri-City Americans, but that can change in a big hurry if he ends up in the right situation with the right people on the Blades team. So I'm anxious to see what Blake Stevenson looks like in a Blades jersey in Regina.
And you talk about the future, and this team is set up pretty well going forward with the base of talent that has taken over, started to take over last year. Scott, you brought up the offensive leaders, and both of you can jump in on this one, talking about Colin Priestner, and let's bring in Mitch Love a little bit too, with back-to-back playoff, I guess you could say qualifications, as you didn't have a chance to actually get to the playoffs last year, but 2 years under Mitch, 2 playoff spots. What's the tandem of Priestner and Mitch Love brought to the team?
Well, what they've brought to the team is certainly that winning culture, and what Colin did in hiring, along with the other management people of the Saskatoon Blades, in hiring Mitch Love, was bringing in a young guy with some different ideas and some background from his time with the Everett Silvertips. That was really a big time thing, to be able to bring that winning culture. I mean, the Silvertips have never been a losing team. They've been habitually in the U.S. division a team that does well, and a reason for it is solid defensive play, great goaltending, and timely scoring. And we saw a lot of that in the 2 seasons with the Blades. Maybe a little more offense than what the Everett Silvertips would have, and maybe not quite the goaltending and defense that you would have with some of the guys they've had in Everett. I mean, you think of Carter Hart, you think of Wolf in goal, Dustin Wolf. I mean, they've had some phenomenal players back on the back end and in goal. But what Mitch Love brought was a lot of those same systems that worked for that team and allowed those players to shine. And there's going to start to do that with the Saskatoon Blades. And I know that guys like Nolan Meyer and Cohen McInnes are really excited about being able to play for this guy. And on the back end, the same sort of a thing for an Aiden Delagrajandier, for a Wyatt McLeod, for a Rhett Reinhardt coming back. Those are guys that are going to thrive because of the coaching and what the systems have been brought in by Mitch Love.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think the really interesting thing to watch over the next kind of 2 years is to see how the Blades do, because Mitch is going to have these young guys now that are old enough to be really impactful players in the league, and they've been around his systems, his culture, and you're going to see that really pay dividends. And I know with my experience in Victoria, it was around I forget if it was the 3rd or 4th year Dave Lowry was in there, but that's when we won the Scotty Monroe Trophy, and it's because he instilled such a culture, good practice habits, good playing habits, and all the guys really, their 3rd and 4th year there, bought into it. They played his style, and it showed. So when you see these guys like Aiden, Rhett, Kyle Krinkovic, Tristan Robbins have a couple of years in that system, really start to understand it. Now they can be the leaders of that system. You're going to see the Blades be a real tough force to play against. And I mean, it sucks that guys like Radek aren't there, but also with the departure of myself and Nolan Neen, guys like Charlie Wright are going to really be able to step up. Charlie was basically a 15-year-old with a late birthday last year, playing as a 16-year-old in the Western Hockey League, and he held his own, and he's really going to be a player to watch in these next couple of years. He's a really dynamic young defenseman, and when he gets his shot, he's gonna play really well.
Okay, one more thing before we take our first break. The league has recently announced a new online streaming platform for the fans, with fans obviously not attending games this season. And that leads me to wonder, what will your job look like less this season, with the buildings locked down, except for player and coach personnel?
Well, and the broadcasters will be allowed into the buildings as well, and it's up to us as radio announcers to not just our listeners, but also our feeds will be picked up again by WHL Live and the new Verizon streamers, and you'll hear our voices if you're watching the game or whether you're listening to the game. Our voices, 7 of us, will be doing that. So it really not much changes, just the service provider more so than anything else. And I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing how it sounds with the Verizon folks streaming the games, and how we interface with that. So I'm looking forward to that.
Sounds good. We're going to step aside, take a quick break, and we'll be back for block number 2 here with Scott Walford and Les Lazaruk on Behind the Mic on ASTV. And again, welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV, ASTVproductions.com, and across the social media networks. joined this week by Les Lazaruk from the Saskatoon Blades and Scott Walford, formerly of the Saskatoon Blades, now with McGill University. I wanted to get into a different type of conversation here in this next segment. The two of you had a chance to work together as player and broadcaster last season with the Saskatoon Blades after Scott got traded from Victoria. What was your experience together working together last season?
Well, for me personally, it was phenomenal. I mean, we're dealing with a young man in Scott, and he's going to probably blush or smile a lot at this. But the fact of the matter is that I was told, and I think it was you, Jonathan, who actually told me that we're getting ourselves in Saskatoon a top-notch young man, besides a pretty darn good defenseman. I mean, here's a fellow that played 4 years with the Victoria Royals, and in his fourth year, he was a first-team West Division All-Star. So you knew you were getting the player, no two ways about that. But the person, what kind of person is he? How easy is he to talk to? Is he, willing to, put forth a little more than just the standard cliche type answers that a lot of guys can do because of just being nervous and not being sure as to what they should be saying. But we're talking about a pretty sure young man here as far as Scott Walford is concerned, knowing what to do, knowing how the game works. And I call it a game. It's not really a game. It's the give and take. It's the back and forth between media, between broadcaster and athlete, and how comfortable you feel in answering questions and opening up and yet being able to say things without giving stuff away and without making yourself maybe look bad in front of your teammates, in front of your team, etc. Even your fans, you can do that pretty easily if you're not careful. Scott knows how to do this, and he did it very, very well. And I was very excited when I heard he was such a good young man, a very good speaker, very easy to talk to, and he was everything that I was told. And as a result, it made our relationship really easy. It was great. I would seek him out at times on off days just because I knew that I was going to get the goods from Scott Walford.
Thanks a lot, Les. Yeah, and I mean the same could be said for me. I mean, I've only been traded once, but I went in and being in Victoria, knowing all the media, I had a really good relationship with them. And my relationship with Les definitely started professional, but as you're together more, you're on the bus more, you have those long U.S. road trips. I definitely got very comfortable with Les, and it grows into a personal relationship where he's met my family. And when you're at the rink before the interview, you're probably talking for 2 to 3 minutes about other things. And then after the interview, if he's not talking to someone else, you're talking about just life, sports, anything around the rink. So it's one of those relationships that when you do have that trust and you know that you're working with good people, it's fun to be around them. It's easy, and you cultivate a relationship that it goes beyond being just professional.
And Scott, you mentioned that you spent most of your career in Victoria, so you get to know that set of media out there, and maybe even in the BC division, you get to know them on a professional level, and you kind of know what to expect. What goes into developing a rapport with media, whether it be your team personnel like Les, who's following you on the bus, or the other media members that you see after every game? What goes into when you go to Saskatoon? What goes into kind of starting over and building that rapport with the new set of media?
Mm-hmm. I think I had a lot of good fortune in Victoria with media, so it was pretty easy for me to trust media in Saskatoon. I mean, just a couple come to mind. I know you and I knew each other personally before professionally, but whether it's Marlon Martins, who's a great guy, you can trust him with anything. If you don't want it on the air, he's not going to put it, just like Les. And Ryan St. Clair's a great guy too. He covers you. You trust him, and he always kind of wants what's best for you. And when you cultivate those relationships, we're not at a level like the NHL is, but you find the media really, they root for you, and they want what's best for you, because they're just people. Like they're doing their job, they're doing it really well. And so when I got to go to Saskatoon, I was able to not be skeptical of the media there. And Les, along with Ryan, they were both awesome, very welcoming to me, and it was really easy to cultivate those relationships with them.
Les, as one of the closest, maybe the closest media member to your team, you follow the team around every day. You're privy to things that the general public isn't. How critical is that for you to know exactly where the lines are in where personal relationships end and where being a broadcaster starts?
Well, I think first of all, I'm going to just correct you on one thing, Jonathan, is that I actually don't work for the team. So
Correct.
I work for the radio company.
Yeah.
And that maybe is a bit of an advantage at times, and it can be a disadvantage as well. The advantage of it is that you can dissociate yourself a little bit and look at things with a little bit more of an objective approach, and yet you're still, like Scott says, you're still rooting for them, because ultimately calling a game and calling a good team and having them be successful only helps everybody involved, even with the radio company here at the Saskatoon Media Group. When the Blades are going good, it's great for the Saskatoon Media Group and for myself. When it comes to being a person who works for the team as a broadcaster, somebody like Cam Moon, who used to be with the Red Deer Rebels, or James Gallo down in Moose Jaw with the Warriors, that's where it can be really advantageous, because you see these kids every day, but then you also have to understand that there's a respect level that has to go in along with the trust. It's trust one thing, but respect is another key thing I find for broadcasters, is that you respect the process, and you respect the fact that these are young men who are trying their darndest to get there, and they're not always going to be successful every time out on the ice. Some guys do really well, some guys have a tough time with it, but you don't belabor those bad times, and you always try and pump up the good times for the young men, because hey, there's families watching, there's parents watching, there's also scouts watching, and they can sometimes take what you're saying and take it at face value and use it either for or against the young man, and you'd really prefer it to be in their favor, because you're hopeful. At least I am. I really hope that all these guys get an opportunity to turn professional, to get a chance to play university hockey, to go on and be really productive members of society. And and getting the personal relationships. Like I'm touched that Scott Walford says that we have a personal relationship, and we do. Last week on the Blades Uncut podcast, Mike Green, who played 15 years in the NHL and was a Blade in the early 2000s, and he said some of the nicest things I've ever had said to me as a broadcaster. And this is a guy who's in his mid-30s now, retired with 3 kids, and I was almost overcome by the kind words. So to be able to cultivate those types of relationships for me is a big deal, and to be able to do it with the trust and respect that both sides have to have, that's ultimately the most important thing you can do in this level of hockey. It's not the same in the NHL. In the NHL, hey, these guys are getting paid pretty well, so they got to perform. So you can be a little more critical as a broadcaster. But at this level, you got to be careful. You really got to rein it in as far as being overly critical, or being, really, getting in on some of the faults of a young man. They can't help it sometimes. Sometimes it just happens. And when it does, you kind of gloss it over and you continue on and look for the better things for them, and certainly make those points for them as well.
Now, Les, you do on-air work. You have a variety of on-air settings where you talk to players, whether that be in the scrum after the game, whether that be a one-on-one recorded for something you're going to put on that night. And I'm not too familiar with yours specifically, if you do the in-game stuff that we sometimes see on network broadcasts. But with those sort of being 3 of the main on-air encounters between player and broadcaster, what are the differences in your approach and what you're looking for in those different types of interviews?
Well, I think for the pregame type of a thing, you're looking to get information from the young man that can be used to help augment setting up the broadcast, setting up the game that night. So you're hoping, in a lot of instances, you're talking to guys that are playing milestone games or coming upon milestone goals, assists, points, whatever the case may be, or they've been on a big streak and they've gotten points in 10 or 11 straight games and are on fire. Those are the sorts of things you're trying to do, is augment what your preparation is and utilizing the guy that's really doing well in order to help out in that respect. As far as off days, you're looking for people who can maybe talk about how the team is doing on a day-to-day basis, whether they're doing well, whether they're struggling a little bit, and what's being said, what's being done in order to try and get them out of slumps, or how do you maintain those good times that are going on. You keep the ball rolling, so to speak. I don't do a lot of post-game scrums. What we do have the fortunate ability to do is do one-on-one interviews after games, especially, I only do it after wins. I don't have players come up after losses. I think that's the toughest thing to ask a young man to do, is to come upstairs in front of a whole bunch of fans to talk about a loss. So I want them to come upstairs when the fans are excited, when they've won and they feel good about themselves, and they're that much more willing to chat about the good times that they've just gone through. And Scott, you were up in the broadcast location post-game where the team won a big game, and you were a big part of it, and it was a lot of fun to be able to not just talk about the teams doing well, but embrace the people in front of you who are your fans that are paying to go and see you play.
And Scott, something that you and I have talked about off air that I think is valid and worthwhile to bring on air is the fact that, yes, in our time together in Victoria, in the post game in Victoria, the media is done basically in the hallway, just outside the locker room door. And so I would sit back on the other side of the hallway and I would watch your scrums and just see how you were engaging with the other media members, making eye contact, giving real answers. And then I would go back and find the video footage and then give it a good listen. And I was always impressed, even before I knew you personally, at how good you were at giving real answers, at being respectful and cordial, good or bad game. Where did that perspective come from at a young age to be able to handle yourself with the media that way?
I think I was very fortunate to be in a couple of the right places at the right time. I got to go to Hockey Canada at a young age. It was great because they had been training for us. Jeff Harris and Adam McKinnon taught us a lot. They were both great. They really kind of came up for the media. And when I was 16, I think that I definitely made a lot of mistakes. But as I got older, I got better, and you have to become more comfortable when you're talking to media and kind of get away from those cliches. When I was at Winnipeg's camp when I was 19, it was great because we had Scott Oak come in and talk to us and give us some kind of outside of the norm media tips and just how to connect with the media and give good answers. And when you look at media, they're just trying to do their job. So if you can give them a better option than up and deep, pucks on net, and kind of those cliches, then they're going to come and talk to you more. You're going to have more interactions with the fans, and you also paint yourself in a better light because fans want to hear what you have to say. Media want to talk to you, and that way you make connections with fans, media, other players, and that's important at the end of the day. Your energy is very important. So if you care about your things, then it goes a long way.
That's really good stuff. We're going to take a break here and be back on the other side with one more quick segment here with Les Lazaruk and Scott Walford on Behind the Mic on ASTV.
At Super 8 Winnipeg West, we have your comfort in mind with free Wi-Fi and free daily Superstart breakfast. We also have guest laundry facilities, a state-of-the-art fitness center, and a jetted hot tub. Sleep well in a spacious guest room equipped with plush new bedding, a 50-inch flat-screen HD TV, microwave, mini refrigerator, and Keurig coffee maker. Or book a suite with a kitchen, ideal for extended stays. Super 8, Winnipeg West, located just inside the perimeter on Portage Avenue.
Welcome back to Behind the Mic on ASTV. Jonathan Hodgson back with you for another week. And this week we've been joined by Les Lazaruk from Saskatoon and Scott Walford from McGill University and former two-time WHL All-Star. And Scott, we were talking in the second block about the player-broadcaster relationship. And we had made mention that you and I had some time together in Victoria, and that kind of started as player fan, honestly, just meeting you outside the room after some games, and it kind of grew from there. And we were talking about your media commitments that you have every night. And I was wondering, for a young player, going back to when you were 16, 17, after you had just been drafted by the Canadians in 2017, what does the average WHL fan who looks at you as a player in a uniform, what does the average fan not realize about the life of a WHL player?
I think definitely how young we are. Maybe not even so much physically, but mentally. I think if fans kind of, like, you can look at high school kids and kids before they're 21, and we're those exact same kids in the Western Hockey League. I think growing up, when I used to look at the WHL players, I used to think, oh, they're so old, they have it all figured out, they're so mature, and but at the same time, we're all just kids. Like we just all want to be with the boys, hang out, and watch sports, go get lunch, go do anything like that. And I think when you're looking at the young 15, 16, 17-year-olds, there's a lot of I know personally, I was very nervous talking to the media. When you start talking to fans, you're kind of your guard's not down as much, and you're a bit more nervous. So you might not, if you're talking to them, you might not actually get to know who they are, just because they don't know how to handle themselves yet. So it's something that you definitely have to learn, and that's a part of maturing and living away from home and growing up in the Western Hockey League. But definitely 16 and 17-year-olds, it's a tough couple of years away from home and managing school, the draft, pressures on the ice, and stuff like that. So looking back, I loved it, but it's you're not as old as you think that you were going to be at that age.
And there's a number of players that I should give a stick tap to, but the one that started everything for myself out there was Griffin Outhouse, and he was kind of the one that connected me to you. But you now, where you're at, or where you're hoping to get started once things get back on the ice, at McGill University. Another one that we both have time with is Will Warm, another Victoria and Edmonton Oil Kings veteran. The two of you are attempting to be together at McGill University for the hockey program there.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting. It would have been nice to play a season this year or be able to train out there this year, but obviously with COVID, everyone's been affected. So I'm really lucky to be at a school like McGill. Not only is it great scholastically, but it's also amazing, I guess, varsity sports wise. So I'm really excited to actually start to go work out there with my teammates and coaches. I think there's a lot of good resources there, a lot of guys that have worked their ranks through McGill that are in the NHL now. So you get some really valuable opinions. And when you look at the guys that have been through McGill, there's quite a few that have ties in the NHL, whether it's Guy Boucher, Mike Babcock, Matthew Darsh, guys in Europe. So it's there's a web of McGill players and coaches through all pro leagues in the world. So that was a big reason why I chose there.
And that's good that you went there, because I was going to go there next with U Sports developing into a really high quality product that turns out a lot of pro alumni now. I was going to ask you about your aspirations going forward. We made mention earlier, 2017 draft pick of Montreal, not signed. Is making the jump to pro still on your radar?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, my goal since I've been young has been to be a professional hockey player, and I think growing up, I used to think that if you went to U Sports, you were kind of saying, you know what, I'm just going to focus on school and kind of get started with real life. But I mean, it's great that the Western Hockey League and the CHL has their scholarship program, but the U Sports is also putting a lot of work to make their product very competitive and a very high-end product for sports, because every year now you see guys signing pro deals from U Sports. I mean, there's guys that have signed NHL deals, AHL deals in Europe. So personally, my goal is still to win a Stanley Cup. My goal is to play in the NHL. So obviously, I wish that I signed an NHL contract in the last 3 years. I didn't, so I had to look at what's the best option for me, and I felt that taking a couple more years to develop, show up knocking at the door in a couple of years, hopefully at an NHL camp, is going to be my best chance to achieve those goals.
Now, Les, for a play-by-play broadcaster who's had no live games to call and coming up on a year now, how does one warm up after an off season like that?
Well, fortunately, the NHL is playing right now. So every once in a while, I'll throw a game on, mute the TV, and practice on my own a little bit. Usually, I've recorded the game and watch it in the morning and do this while others are sleeping in the house, so I'm not trying to bother them too terribly much. But yeah, you're to yourself. You watch a game and you find yourself lapsing into that on your own and trying to keep yourself warm. The only thing I've been able to do, I did do one game in the interim, and that was an under 18 Saskatchewan game, AAA game between the Saskatoon Contacts and the Saskatoon Blazers back in late November before all the restrictions started to come in. So that worked out pretty well as far as I was concerned, and it was good to get that game in. So I'm not totally out of practice, but I'm looking forward to getting back to it in March.
And one of your play-by-play colleagues in the Western Hockey League is going to have a chance to reach a milestone this season, probably not in the fashion that anybody envisioned, but Mr. Bob Ridley with the Medicine Hat Tigers, with game number 2 of the Central Division Hub, is going to hit 4,000. What have some of your encounters been like with Mr. Ridley?
Well, he's an absolute gentleman. He's a prince of a man. He's the dean of us guys that do what we do in the league, the 22 of us. And I mean, when you consider that for many of the years that he has worked for the behalf of the Medicine Hat Tigers, he drove the bus as well as called the games. And that's crazy. I mean, I can't imagine doing that, where you get in the bus, you take off, you go to the rink, you get there 2 hours before game time, everybody unloads, gets themselves into the rink. You, in the meantime, grab your equipment, go upstairs, head up, get your interviews, get everything put together, call the game, and then once you're done with your post-game show, you come back downstairs, and everybody piles up into the bus, and away you go again, and you're driving. And I mean, that's a long, long day, and he did that for like 35 years more, 40 years, 45 years. He still does it every once in a while, and I mean, Riggs is just one of the, he's an icon. It's as simple as that in our Dodge, and the fact that he's getting to 4,000 games, only missing once a game with the Medicine Hat Tigers, that's just phenomenal. It's a record that will never be achieved by anybody in this Dodge ever again.
And you bring up earlier in the show, you brought up some of your work on the Blades Uncut podcast. That's been one of the things that has kept you busy and kept Mitch Bach busy over with the Blades. Tell us where that came from and some of the highlights that's come about through that.
Well, it's something that came from out of the Blades organization itself. It's a conversation between Mitch Bach and Tyler Warwick, who's the director of business operations with the team. They had discussed how do we keep our fans engaged with the team while we're going through this pandemic. The idea was, let's start a podcast, and they approached me about being a co-host, approached our station about hosting as far as being the people that record the whole thing and help to produce it. And it's worked out very well. I think, I can't remember what number we're on tonight. We're just about to record episode 29. And we've had a lot of great people on. We had Scott Walford on, and our very first guest, in fact, was Scott Walford. But we've had, like I say, last week was Mike Green. With the season coming up, we got Ryan Marsh, Chase Waters, and the commissioner of the Western Hockey League, Ron Robinson, all going to be joining us here in a little bit. But we've had a lot of former Blades, some broadcasters. We had Chris Cuthbert on. So that was fun. Dennis Bayak, who's a former Blades broadcaster, still does the Winnipeg Jets games on TSN. So we've had a lot of great people. Tony Twist, we've had Wendell Clark, maybe arguably the greatest Blade of all time, was a guest with us. So, I mean, we've had some outstanding guests in the course of the 28 previous episodes, and we're looking forward to episode 29 and continuing on as we get going with this 24-game hub season in Regina.
And you can find that promoted throughout the Blades social media platforms and through their website. Guys, thanks so much for coming on. I know we've been looking forward to this for a while, and it finally worked out, and it was a blast. You two, pulling the curtain back a little bit, you two are two of my biggest, personally, two of my biggest supporters and encouragers in my hockey pursuits and otherwise. So this was this had to happen, and we finally made it happen. So guys, thank you for this, and thank you for everything.
Thanks for inviting me, Jonathan. Scott, it's great to see you. All the best with your studies, first and foremost. Say hi to your family, and we look forward to seeing how you're doing with the McGill University team starting in the fall again, because by then you guys have got to be playing, right?
Yeah, I sure hope so. Yeah, and same goes to you, Ralph. It's great to see you again. Thanks a lot for having me on, Hodgie. Like you said, it had to happen. I'm happy that it worked out, and hopefully next year when you guys are together, or in the future when you guys are together in Victoria with Marlon, you guys can catch breakfast like I've seen you guys talk about on Twitter.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jonathan.
Sounds great. Thanks, Les. Thanks, Wally. We'll be back on the other side of one more break with our wrap-up here on Behind the Mic on ASTV. And welcome back one more time to Behind the Mic on ASTV. That was a lot of fun being joined by Les Lazaruk, the radio play-by-play voice for the Saskatoon Blades, as well as former Blade at Victoria Royal, Scott Walford, who is now at McGill University. Thanks to them for coming on and talking about the WHL's anticipated return coming up for the Saskatchewan teams, coming up for the East Division next month, March 12th. That starts up, and then a fun discussion on the working relationship between player and broadcaster, and a little bit of catching up with what those two have going on. Once again, thanks so much for them coming on. And before we sign off tonight, we want to give one more thank you to last week's guest, Jerry Howarth. That was an absolute highlight and a pleasure bringing Jerry on, the former longtime radio voice of the Toronto Blue Jays. So engaging and so much fun to catch up with him. He wanted to send his thanks along to everybody who watched, and we want to send our thanks back to him for coming on. We're here every night, every Friday night, 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern on ASTVproductions.com and on YouTube and Facebook, and you can find our content across Twitter and Facebook, or Twitter and Instagram as well. So be sure to connect with us on all our platforms. Don't miss Behind the Mic every Friday, and all of our shows and our live games on ASTVproductions.com and across the platforms. We'll be back next week with another conversation with another great sportscaster, and we're working on finalizing our lineup for the next couple of weeks, and it's looking really exciting, and we're just putting the finishing touches on it, and we'll bring it to you on Facebook and Twitter as we seal things up for our plans. So be sure to be back with us next Friday here on Behind the Mic. For Les Lazaruk and Scott Walford, this is Jonathan Hodgson saying thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next week.